since we have been so shut off from our feminine and also in like different layers, it is very difficult to talk about because we're just so much more used to explaining things in the masculine. And also like the feminine is so much beyond words. So even like trying to put words on her is like a disservice. But at the same time, it's important to do so because if we can't talk about it, then, I mean, it's a part of the awakening to tell her story and to actually put words. But I just always like try to make that caveat. We can do our best, but we'll never be able to like put words on the actual what the feminine is.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Psychedelic Conversations. We have in the house Fanny Norlin today. Thank you so much for being with us. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
So you're from Sweden.
Yes.
Right? You're joining us from Sweden. And I would like to share a few lines of your bio with our listeners so they can meet you and also understand your background. And then we'll take it from there. You are the creator of Lifeforce Leadership, an approach that identifies and explores the core dimensions of feminine and masculine leadership, revolutionizing network-based and self-organizing organizations. Your experience with the potential that lies within fully unleashing the feminine and masculine in a creative dance underlies your approach to business, leadership, and societal development. This is an amazing subject to dive in. Before we begin, can we please talk about what brings you to this work?
So I think like I've had a calling to like the deeper realms of humans since like a young age. And in university, it came out as very interest in like groups and organizing. I started 2 student organizations, and then I first studied engineering, but then also took a master's in management, and was introduced to this movement called the art of hosting while I was at university. I don't know if you're aware of it, but it's this global movement that started, I think now like 30 years ago, and was one of the pioneers around like complex adaptive systems and approaches to leadership and working with groups, working with emergence, basically. And I was completely like, I remember my first weekend at Art of Hosting, I just like cried for 3 days because I felt such a homecoming to like people who were exploring deeper layers. And then after university for a couple of years, I worked as a consultant and with this whole kind of new paradigm in business, like self-organization, more like moving from this like top-down hierarchical industrial model of both business and society into a more network-based, organic, and basically what the internet is enabling us societally as this big shift, and both philosophically went really deep into that, but also practically working in businesses. And I, as a consultant, like it was super fascinating, and I also saw a lot of like epic fails of trying to like do progressive leadership, or, and I just had this feeling that we're not really there, like we're not getting it. And then that was, I think, 7 years ago. I had a mentor and a friend. Her name is Lovis Alsen, and she asked me like. She had started talking about the feminine and about the power of female sexuality. And I was like curious, but I don't know, not really into it. And then she asked me if I wanted to take her course, and it was called at the time Divine Eros and Pussy Power. And like, I have no idea why I said yes to doing this, because it wasn't really in my world. And then, but for some reason I did say yes. And like my body was just like such an opening. And the coming month and years, I had like a quite strong like tantric sexual awakening. And from the beginning, I started to feel this feminine power in me. I like had this like, okay, this is what is missing. in order for us to make the transition, to fruitfully go through this transition that we are in globally. I just had a deep, like, bodily knowing that was the case. And also in myself, like, I really went into kind of a dark night of the soul after I had this awakening. And without that guidance, like, it was the first time I actually dared to go into the depth of the darkness and, like, say yes to it. And I mean, it wasn't like a joyful yes, it was a very painful yes, but still, like, to be with it. And then after that came, like, enormous power, and just for me personally, but then also I saw how it was affecting how in the business world. And yeah, and now 8 years later, I've had a lot more experiences, witnessed so many women, witnessed what happens to men when the feminine is healed and unleashed. And then from that, like, built Lifeforce Leadership, which is this approach to how to actually unleash both the masculine and the feminine in collaboration.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. Super interesting. This is kind of my wheelhouse, so I'm really looking forward to unpack this with you a little bit if you're open to it. So we are currently, I'm sure some of our listeners will be very familiar. Currently, we are seeing a lot of organizations, leaders, facilitators, experts in the field. They are holding these type of retreats. It's kind of on the rise. It's increasing. There isn't, maybe it's the algorithm caught my attention. I don't know, or vice versa. Like, obviously, I do research a lot about the feminine and all this primordial intelligence. And I'm guessing maybe I'm caught in the algorithm. So I'm seeing a lot. Is it me, or is it really the world kind of at this precipice of, having these conversations about awakening the feminine power and so on? And I also remember a documentary. Was it The Fifth Sun? I'm not sure if you know. There is a documentary called Fifth Sun. I may not be remembering it correctly, but there was a native wisdom in that documentary that this is the time where feminine will rise. So this was kind of like an esoteric native teachings where it was expected. It's almost like timely. It's happening. So maybe that, maybe the astrological movement. I don't know. I have friends in the, archetypal astrology, and they also speak in this language. This is the time of feminine coming back. So I'm not sure if it's that all correlating together, or is it that somehow the humanity is going through some kind of a pressure cooker where women are no longer able to function as opposed to in the old world where they did. So there is this opening, there's a quickening, there is a momentum. And of course, what I would like to talk about, all that to say is, what are we talking about when we say feminine power? What are we talking about when we say masculine power? What does that even mean? If somebody is just kind of coming into this conversation the first time, I don't think a lot of people understand, I don't think a lot of people are fully grasping what this is all about, because, again, sometimes you see retreats like womb healing, sisterhood circles. But then from where I'm standing, sometimes all I see is toxicity and culty vibes and hierarchical things are happening in those circles. But the intention is pure. It's like the intention is pure. I am fully aware that women are doing this from a very deep place of intentional, deliberate, from a good motivation, but it just turns around, goes the other way very quickly. So I'd like to hear, what are we talking about when we say feminine awakening?
I mean, that's the best question, of course. And
we could do our best to unpack.
We will do our best. And also to preface it that since we have been so shut off from our feminine, and also in different layers, it is very difficult to talk about, because a lot of the words we have are we're just so much more used to explaining things in the masculine term, and also like the feminine is so much beyond words. So even like trying to put words on her is like a disservice, but at the same time, it's important to do so, because if we can't talk about it, then I mean, it's important for it's a part of the awakening to tell her story and to actually put words. But I just always like try to make that caveat. So like we can do our best, but we'll never be able to like put words on the actual what the feminine is. One model that I created based a lot on Louise's teachings, but I also created it together with Adriana Forte and Heather Watts, is to talk about like 3 intelligences, and basically what the feminine kind of follows the life cycle, and that there's like intelligences all along that cycle. So I talk about like the erotic intelligence, which is both like the death and the life. So it's like this feminine ability to like compost into new life, like the creativity, the erotic, the aliveness, the life force. Then I talk about the mystos, so the mystic intelligence, was the feminine ability to like tap into the mycelium, to like feel into the how everything is correlated and united, and create. That's like the feminine ability to create these stories that really like inspire you and make you feel how things make sense. And it's not like a logical or rational, it's more like a mythic ability to unite. And then I talk about the natural intelligence, which is again more coming back to so it's like aliveness, unification, and then it's more coming back to death. And this is like both the ability for like both truth and compassion and like fierce protection. And it's like the mother bear, like the ability to feel into the cycles, to the natural ability, the natural knowing and fierceness, and set up boundaries, stand up for the truth. So like those 3 intelligences, and like one way of looking at like what happens to the feminine, like the best way of taking the feminine out of her power is to split her off from one of these intelligences. And I'm not saying it's not important that it's exactly these 3, but those are the ones that make sense to me. But it's more like you need the fullness, like you need the fierceness and the power, you need the erotic intelligence, and you need like the holding together. And a lot of I see people doing women doing women's work have only received channels in one of them, and they don't have the others, and then it becomes distorted, because like the whole thing, like of religious dogmas like Christianity, like what we did is separate these 3 things, and either attack all of them or only allow one of them, and there's this huge integration work that has to be done for women, and we need like lineages and teachings that can tap into all 3. That's one way I could.
This is the best approach so far I've heard. Seriously, thank you so much. This is great, because this is kind of gives us a foundation now where we can go from here. So where does this leave men? Where do we put the masculine, the male, in this picture? Where do they come in?
So I had like a huge realization when just personally, when I started to tap into this full feminine intelligence of both this like power, strength, fierceness, flirtation, eroticness, sensuality, and this deep feminine wisdom. When I started to like lead from that place, I realized that men started showing up differently as well. And I think there's something about the constructive, powerful, true feminine that really, truly calls in men. And what I realized is that, because usually when we talk about the feminine and the masculine, it's like there's a polarity between the feminine, like the masculine is, and we usually talk about like that we have too much of this masculine, that it's like it's burning up the planet, it's like overdoing, it's just doing, and just stuck in this dopamine doing mode. But that actually I realized that there's a strong polarity within the masculine. So I talk about the holding and the creating masculine, so that there is this creating masculine that in his light is like the passionate, the driven, the executor, like the masculine that gets shit done, that's like really fucking good, like with full testosterone, just makes things happen, build things, it hunts, is out and scouting, protects. Also, the holding masculine also has some protection, and then that the holding masculine is this masculine energy that is more like a mountain or a tree, that's just like very stable, and also deeply connected with kind of reason and logic and clarity. So what the holding masculine does is listen in to the feminine at the beginning of her cycle, and listen into like, what is it that wants to emerge? What is it that wants to come alive? And then listens this, and then has the ability to, with presence, create clarity and create direction, so that this creating masculine can really step into execution mode and build and create, but in service, and deeply in service of the feminine. But the creating masculine needs to be guided by this holding masculine. And while the creating masculine is in doing, the feminine is also there, kind of with this more fierceness and holding together, so that the creating masculine doesn't just get scattered, or that it's kept together in the tribe or whatever, metaphorically. So I see that. And that's where this really beautiful dance between the masculine and feminine can start to happen, when we like come back to our true archetypes. And it's amazing to like collaborate with men who want to be in the masculine in this way. It's like my friend talked about that when I show up in my feminine, he becomes the best version of himself. And I think that's so beautiful, and the potential of men and women.
Well, this is quite controversial, because this could trigger a lot of men thinking that we don't need women to be the best version of ourselves. Like, how dare you? Like, we are already the equal, or the, if not higher, in some sort of distorted ways, right?
I mean, it does trigger a lot of men, but I think like no man who's truly in his heart can say that that's not true. Like, that women don't make him become a better man. Like, it's just, I mean, you just feel into the energy of that. Like, to me, it just resonates so true. And like, yes, but actually I've met very few men who have been triggered by this work. And of course, I live in Sweden, like there's amazing men here and everything, but like, actually I've met a lot more women triggered by the work than men. But this is the thing, we need each other. And until we come to that realization, we're going to be in this fight with each other. And to me, like, I don't believe in going out and like forcing these perspectives on people. I rather like dance with the people who are ready. And there's tons of people who are ready to dance. And it's magical. And it's, it's the same, like, of course we all women can do both the masculine and the feminine, and all men can do both the feminine and the masculine. Not maybe to the deepest extent. We don't have testosterone. They don't have a womb. They can't create life in their bodies. Like, there are strong biological differences, but like, when it comes to just like tasks or doing things, of course we can do both. But the question is, why would we want to? Like, that's the question. It's not that we can't. It's just that like, it's and sometimes we want to, and go for it, like that's fine. But to me, it's like, again, like making the world come the most alive. And to me, that question is like, what makes you come most alive? Like, don't listen to what I say. What makes you come most alive? And follow that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is such a great insight. So, okay, I want to unpack a couple of things here, if that's okay. One is, so do we agree that from a dualistic and primordial perspective, and there's a biological difference, which is also going to trigger a lot of non-binary standpoint, people that are now coming in, we have this emerging non-binary standpoint, where the gender fluidity is emerging in our time, interestingly, towards like oneness. Like, some of the spiritual teachers would say, well, it's no brainer, it's coming, it's emerging, because there is this deep desire in the unconscious that driven this force of manifesting this non-binary standpoint, because there was, whatever gets pushed into the unconscious will have to manifest in some way or another in the physical, in the conscious, in our daily lives. Therefore, the non-binary movement, which I understand, because it's kind of like the force is driving itself towards like oneness, dissolving the duality.
Yeah.
We can look at it from that perspective, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways in, but staying with that perspective. So the work in Awakening Feminine Leadership, which is the feminine leadership path that I've taken, is very influenced by Diamond approach. I don't know if you have with Almas. It's a quite vast, really, really rich and deep spiritual teaching that's based on Sufism and Gurdjieff and Buddhism and also psychoanalysis. Like it's really, really rich. And Almas,
what is the teachings?
The Diamond approach. And he, this is just a couple months ago, I heard this that I thought made so much sense. So he talks about different turnings in your spirituality. So where the first turning he talks about is when you realize that the voices in your head aren't you, they're actually your ego structure. Like that's the first spiritual turning. And he calls it the first turning, I think. And then the second turning is, he talks about this non-dual turning. So realizing that everything, absolving the ego, basically, everything is united, everything is one. And then he talks about a third turning, which he calls unilocal, which is like, it's difficult to put words on, but it's like my experience of it. I've mostly experienced the unilocal spiritual state, is that like, rather than me becoming dissolved and there's no boundaries and everything is one, like I become even more of me. It's almost like the whole universe is in me. I realize I get like a bit turned on when I talk about it, but it's like I just become so clear and so filled up by my essence, and it's such a homecoming, and I can see the essence in everyone around me. And so it's like, yeah, it's called unilocal. And I don't even know if I have words to describe it, but I have an hypothesis that the unilocal spirituality is much more feminine. It's like and if you look at organizations, like how to do self-organization, you need unilocal spirituality. That's where creative hierarchies come from. Like it's in service of this feminine call, and you're so full of in service. So you're completely you, but you're in service of the whole. So it becomes this really cool holocratic hierarchy, and that's what we need to build the world on. And that's why I think the world needs to be feminine now, because it's a unilocal feminine spirituality that I think is much more natural for women. Hamid says that for him non-dual came first and then unilocal, but that he's open to it, that it can be other way around. So actually, I just want to, like, this whole non-binary, that we're spiritually going to non-binary, is a very masculine spirituality. And that's what I feel a lot in the queer world, that we don't have a deep understanding of the feminine. So when we say that things are just going to be non-dual, we're actually just making the world more for the masculine, because we don't understand the feminine, and all we have access to is the masculine. And that's, it's just, yeah, a lot of this queer is deeply anti-feminine, and there is queerness. Like there's always been the few percent that are gender fluid, and they're so needed. Like in this model that I talk about, they're the bridge builders between the masculine and the feminine, and they're so needed. But that doesn't mean that everybody has to be that. So to me, it's again saying yes to the truth and what people are, but not making everybody else your truth. Yeah, that was a long.
No, this is great. Oh gosh, so many things came up to my mind. So the non-duality or gender fluidity movement could be the manifestation of this much denser, like a denser counterforce. Again, it could be a manifestation of maybe millennia from, if you go back to history. Historically, I think historically there's been a violence towards the biological difference, female biology and the male biology. So I'm thinking, I know what you're talking about is the awakening the feminine energy and the masculine. It's not necessarily binds to the physical body. It's not the male body it's not a separation women and men. It's more like the archetypal force. It's a very primordial intelligence that awakens within us, right?
Yeah.
But somehow historically there's been a violence done to men and women also, of course, which brings me to, Chris Dever's work, which I was introduced through Alexander Bard, and her abject relation to the mother. That brings me, that kind of gave me the answers about why there would be such a violence towards the women's body, and also violence from women to themselves, their own to them, because of that indoctrination, this abjection, the abject relation about the mess, the gore, the blood, the physical, the whole mess of the biology of being human, right? So I guess all that thread to pull together, maybe it's kind of birthing this non-duality or gender fluidity mass movement. These are my thoughts. I don't know what you're thinking.
Yeah, I think for sure. And going into that, the object relation on the mother, it becomes so clear that it's on the mother, it's not on the mother and the father. So there is a clear difference between men and women. And yes, I talk about it as energies and the archetypal, and that they are both in men and women. And there's we have a womb, we carry babies in our stomachs, and when the babies are born, it's on us that they have this projection. So there is a difference, biological difference between men and women, and I think the only thing that can get us away from that is if we become more and more cyborgs, and it's actually tech that is moving us away from that. But the human body hasn't evolved for 10,000 of years, since we have deeply archetypical between men and women. And again, there's always been some who are more fluid and always will be, and they also have always had a very important role. But yeah, and I really also through Hamid's work, I've been looking deep into this object relation theory. Or I did my master's thesis on consciousness development, 10 years ago, but specifically looking at more, this spiritual, energetic aspects of it as well. And I realized that I had this download of kind of a model of the feminine wounding in layers. And that at the core, there is this mother wound, and that's always been there. And that can kind of correlate to the tribal times when we were really living with the cycles of the nature, and all our religion was towards Mother Earth, when we were living these nomadic, and then with the development of technology, there was another layer, which was kind of what I call it the witch womb, which was again attacking female sexuality, and then we have the modern world womb, which is even leaving the women, even leaving the feminine even more, with the feminism that's almost been we can also be men. And I think looking at these, and when you do women's work, I think you have to work your way back down. So you almost have to start at this modern world wound, which is about just I'm actually a woman. I'm not a man. I'm actually a woman. And to say yes to your femininity, say yes to your longing, say yes to your sensuality, say yes to your body, your sexuality. Because that's unwinding the first layer, and then you can go down into the witch wound, which is deeply healing sisterhood, using your power, using understanding not only if in the first it's female sexuality is creative and powerful, but in this witch wound layer, it's female sexuality is magic. It's the root of all life. It's the depth. And then once you've done that layer, then you're ready to go into the mother wound. And then it's it's like this, the feminine, I have some notes here, but like the feminine decides if I live or die. And that's why there's a deep and intense hate towards what you were talking about, this object relation to the mother. And then you have to reclaim, like, I am she who is all. Like, that's the deepest reclamation of the feminine. And that's also, we see, you know, different women doing different layers of this work, but they don't know where they are in the layers. Like, some women find this, like, you know, just being in your sensuality and sexuality, and you're like, oh, this is the work. And like, yes, it's part of it. But there's deeper layers. And like, and you know, the work that you're doing is like at that deepest layer of this mother wound. So yeah, I don't even like, it's just so complex and there's so many layers, and this non-binary, you have to look at all the different layers and throughout history. Yeah.
I love that, unpacking it backwards, winding down, not going spiraling out into the, you know, transcending. It's actually, winding down into the deeper depths of the ground zero of what this is all about. And in my work, I came across, you know, as you said, coming across these 3 layers. I also came across those 3 layers, which is interesting. I feel like as humans, when we tap into these deep work, I feel like we can also access to the universal truth. Mm-hmm. So I'm always meeting people that are talking about this same stuff in a different language, different ways, but there are prominent pointers, like 3 layers, or, you know, the biological, like we cannot deny the biology. It exists, you know. Okay, we may be moving into the non-fluid, you know, movement towards the unity consciousness, but doesn't matter, because we come from, it's almost like forgetting where you come from then becomes the biggest obstacle. Doesn't allow you to move forward. And in my work, I've always believed in going back to go forward. And each layer we go back and unwind and unpack and understand, we're clearing, or there's a ritual of decluttering or ritual of clearing happening in our psyche, emotional field, physical, biological, and abject. And then we can then move forward with this more authentic sort of energy, right? Or this wisdom that comes in, that drives us, this force, awakens, whatever you want to call that. It could be the feminine. But in my work, like, I realized, okay, the mother wound, let's go back right into the mud, the deep layers of the unconscious. What's happening there? One of the things that screams is that women are being oppressed. Like, women, you know, there's this notion of, I think a lot of rebellion and the activism of the feminists comes from probably a manifestation. I'm not sure, these are my hypotheses, and they're always subject to revision. And for example, the women that I worked with all my years, to be honest, there's a secret thing going on behind the closed doors. For example, they don't like being a mother. They are terrified. They don't know what they're doing. And they're just fed up of the society expecting them to multitask, nurture life, know what to do with these babies when they cry and when they don't sleep. Women are fed up. Women are tired. Women resent. There's a lot of resentment that women carry, which kind of turns into toxicity towards the outer world, right? So there's a lot there.
Yeah, but I mean, to me, it makes so much sense, since especially in the West, like, society is so not geared towards motherhood, like just how society looks and all the expectations. And again, like, going back to that, our spirituality has been so masculine, so that all the ideals and what we should be wanting to achieve, like, are so much from a masculine norm. And then how the life journey, it's not at all according to, you know, the maiden mother Maga crone journey. Like, there's so little wisdom of the feminine. That's like one aspect. And then the other aspect is like complete lack of sisterhood. Like, how are you supposed to be a mother without your other sisters? Like, we're not designed to be mothers by ourselves. Like, it's just not. That's and like, I mean, if you ever, you know, are in a room with like many women, you just feel it. Like, this is the natural way of raising children. And like, I'm not a mother myself, so I, you know, but I have many friends who have kids, and it just, there's like this intelligence of the feminine that, that comes back again and again in my work and with my, like the sisters that I'm walking with on this deep path and other women, that like we need each other. Like the feminine, the masculine spiritual journey can much more be done, like on a mountain meditating, but like the feminine journey, and I don't know if it's because there's so much to heal or because it will be like that anyways. But like there is just something about, being together. But then since there's so many wounds in sisterhood and there's so much going on between women and nobody has learned us to access our power. Like I was terrified of female groups before I was able to access my own feminine power because they just got so messy and intertwined and felt collapsing into each other. So there's so many layers to that as well. Why it's
totally
really to be a mother. And then what you said when I listened to you about like how challenging it is to be a mother, and then how much the mothers affect the children, and that's what we're producing. It's just this like
this is the blind spot of our world. In any culture, this is within every culture, country. There is no border. There is no specific, religion or culture or tradition that doesn't have this problem. Women, it's almost like, the existential mother concept that I use. Humanity knows deep down there is an inherent knowing that we all come from somewhere, men or women. It's almost like, not to make this a hierarchical thing, men also are, they come from a mother. So does women. Or every single human come from a womb. And then there is this existential womb that humanity knows that we come from somewhere. And I think in my understanding, like religion kind of helps with that, having a God somewhere in our psyche to worship and to devote kind of alleviates the existential crisis and the fear of not knowing why we're here in the first place. How did we come here? And but there's an inherent knowing that we come from somewhere, and that could be the existential mother manifested in this biological mother on Earth, walking as biological female body. That is the mother. We can literally work with these female mothers that walking on the earth and alleviate their own suffering and resentment. And they should never be left alone when they are raising children. Some of the tribal traditions, they knew this. Dr. Gabor Mate talks about this all the time. There is a reason why they say it takes a village to raise a child. It's a bit like that. I feel the same. And if it's not done in the way that women are seen and, held and supported in their journey of bringing life to this world, especially within the first few years of the child, expect problems. Expect problems. And this is accumulative. What we are, I think, dealing with, there is an accumulative toxicity that's been going on for many, many years, where women had to be, women had to deal with a lot. This is not to say victimize them or, any of that. It's a very direct and open conversation about where we are at. I think if we don't have these conversations, we will never see our blind spots. Like you said earlier, we have to talk about it. It's hard to talk about it because there is a lot of fragility and triggers around this. And men, I know you're limited for time today, and I'd love to have you back for further discussions because, you're kind of in my space, and I love these kind of deeper discussions around the gender politics, shall we say. It's been going on for too long, and I think it's time to really be very honest about what's going on. But before we close our conversation, one last thing I wanted to come back to. You said the holding masculine. What does that mean?
So the holding masculine, I see as the archetype of men who can deeply listen, or actually first it's like creating a protective space, like for the feminine to, or not for the feminine doesn't need it, but it becomes a lot more easier for the feminine to like fall into that surrender so that life force can come through if the holding masculine is there and like really holding out, protecting the space, basically.
It sounds like an authentic, maybe initiated masculine, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, then, so.
But also, so I found this also reading, again, I just read this book that was really inspiring by Hamid, where he talks about the core essences in kind of the object relation to mother and father, like the essences that the mother represents and that the father represents. And the whole thing about becoming a human, this is very, Sufis, is to rediscover these essences within ourselves. So we don't have to project them on others in either grasping or hating because they're not us. That's what we do with the mother, and the deepest hate is for the mother, but we also have it on the father. And so basically the essences that the mother gives, he talks about merging gold, which is this ability to feel completely nourished and held and open. What you feel like when you're a baby in your mother's arms, that kind of merging, like the deep, deep, and that's what enables you to unite with other people, to actually merge and to meet other people authentically, not just meet your projection of them. And the other one is strength, which is the individuation essence with it, which is the both sexuality and aggression, this individual power, which helps us separate from the mother, right? So I see, and to me, it really maps to the creating and the holding feminine. And he talks about that Eros is merging gold and strength. So these are like the core essences of the feminine. And on the masculine, he talks about, on the holding masculine side, he talks about brilliance, which he talks about its completeness and protection, the feeling of being completely contained and looked after. So that's like that holding part. And then he talks about diamond consciousness, which is like clear objectivity, guidance. It's like having a spiritual friend. And to me, that just so correlates what I've been feeling about the holding masculine, about this ability to deeply listen and create clarity. But then there's also the creating masculine, which is universal will, confidence in one's capacity. So that's also the integrated masculine, but quite, because it's a lot more action orientated and doing. So these like merging gold, strength, brilliance, diamond consciousness, and universal will. Like if we had adult men and women, and of course we need all of them, but that men's just archetypically are more designed for either this kind of warrior or priest, as Alexander talks about, which is like the priest is this brilliance and diamond consciousness, and the warrior is this universal will, like competence, doing things in service. And then you have the feminine of both the merging gold, which is this like mystos, unifying, and this individuation, strength, life force. So that's some more depth to the archetypes.
I love these transmutations or permutations of the masculine. Gosh, I wish we had more time. We definitely need to have you back. Only because maybe we can end the call on a cliffhanger, because this is what I want to say as the last closing notes. So I love the permutations of the masculine, because this is kind of part of my research currently, and I was pointed out to do more work around the masculine permutations. So my controversial approach always is, if the male body or anyone who identifies as these permutations of the masculine comes from a mother, since the this archetypal mother is in the shadows, sitting in that toxic self-serving feminine energy, giving birth to these children, I feel like the initiation or the rites of passages for in full embodiment of these kind of permutations almost impossible. And I'm wondering, how do we give birth to these kind of embodied versions of the masculine? How do we give birth? How do we bring the two together to face and to dissolve these conflicts between? Because if, like I said, if the mother, there's a lady that I've been listening, Marie Louise, she's incredible. She says that when the society puts so much pressure on the mother, and then the mother, when a child is naughty and doing all these things, like very basic, mundane stuff, where the child is spilling something all over the place, and then the mother cannot even discipline because she is in a conflict between, I cannot shout at my child because this will damage the child. But then that gets pushed into unconscious, and then she does something else that is far worse, indirectly.
Yeah.
And this is the feminine that I am interested in, and this is the feminine that I want to bring it to light. And that's kind of like my life's work as well. How do we pull this type of archetype of the mother into the light, out of the underground, into the light, to integrate? Because I know that whoever carries a womb, which comes back to the conversation with the womb, whoever is born with the womb in this life, let's say, carries that underground, shadowy archetype mother that I've been looking at. So maybe it's another conversation, but please share your last thoughts with us.
I mean, my last thoughts, that it is another conversation, is again this like strength essence. This, and that's why female sexuality is so important in this. And I don't have time to go into the depths of it, but I mean, basically, it's just saying what you're saying about bringing our life force, our individuation, our strength, our sexuality, aggression, but not more fierceness, let's say, if to use bringing that into the light is like the huge work to be done for women. And I think it needs to be done in those layers, going backwards, to stepping into our power. And like the huge task for us as women in the world now is doing that without guidance of the elders. Because, there was lineages of women, Oracle of Delphi, in ancient Persia, like there was 1,000-year-old traditions of, crones, elder women holding this rites of passage for younger women. And it was only oral traditions. And when that got slaughtered, there's nothing written down. So it got completely lost. So that's, to me, like, yeah, maybe that's to leave, like, that's the big daunting task for women. Like, how do we rediscover this? And we have to go in to that void without being guided. You should be guided by a woman who's already been through it. But there's so few women who are. I mean, there are tons, but percentually, and I think we need to do it together. Like, we need to navigate through this as lost women kind of together and rediscovering this lineage. And that's, to me, like, that's the most important work that can be done in this world right now.
Absolutely. And it's going to be the most difficult one, because just to kind of debunk the whole patriarchy, toxicism, like the hate towards patriarchy, I think one of the reasons that I feel that it was slaughtered and shut down and diminished is not because of men or patriarchy, it's actually women doing it to themselves as well.
And we see that because this power is so scary, because it's so immense.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you so much. Where can they find you? Can you tell us where our listeners can find you, your work, where connect on social media, and then we'll let you go.
Yeah, so I have my website, fannynorlin.com. I'm not on social media at all. But I'm on YouTube, and you can find links to talks on my website as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We'll add your bio links and everything in the show notes, and I'm going to be on your case to get you back as soon as possible to follow up because we've got more to unpack on this. And thank you so much for your heartfelt wisdom, everything that you do and the work you stand for. I really appreciate you. Thank you for your connection, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for this. I really, really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. Please do comment and share and say how you feel. If this kind of triggered something in you, please do comment. Drop your comments below, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.